University of Waterloo in Ontario has something like a caddy swim at Bushwood, 1 to 115. Except this is by race. Black Folks Swim, Folx, folks. I'm not, I try to keep up with the Orwellian nomenclature, but that one has me a bit baffled. I assume it means black people. Come and enjoy the pool with other black folks. This dedicated time can be used for lengths or recreation in the 6 available lanes for fast, medium, and recreational swimming. The diving well is open as well. Please follow the lane swim etiquette and all health regulations. There are also swim lessons from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. First come, first served basis. These lessons will be taught by experienced black swimmers and instructors because obviously white people can't teach black people and black people can't teach white people. You have to be segregated. Isn't that what the civil rights movement was about? Quoting, this is all from the University of Waterloo Athletics and Recreation page. This time, Black Folks Swim is, quote, dedicated to building a better relationship with water for the black community, unquote. Yeah, well, I guess you'll have to take that in and decide how you want to react to that. It comes across as more than a bit patronizing to me, but so does this, actually. Piece in the Wall Street Journal recently by Lawrence Krauss. Some other course offerings. We'll just stay in Canada, but, I mean, you could... Well, actually, this isn't in Canada. We've got another example in Canada, but this is Rice University in the great state of Texas. Afrochemistry, the study of Black Lives Matter. Did you see what they did there? Quote, students will apply chemical tools and analysis to understand black life in the United States, and students will implement African American sensibilities to analyze chemistry. What? No prior knowledge of chemistry or African American studies is required for engagement in this course. You could have stopped with no prior knowledge is required or will be conferred. The state of higher education. Again, this drum that we've been beating for the last several weeks, because a couple of Ivy League university presidents self-immolated does not mean that things are changing in the academy. And there is a lot of evidence to suggest it's quite the contrary. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforementioned Lawrence Krauss, who's a theoretical physicist, president of the Origins Project Foundation, and author of The Edge of Knowledge, Unsolved Mysteries of the Cosmos. Lawrence Krauss, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's nice to be with you, virtually at least.
I don't know. Shall we start with black chemistry or black swim time at University of Waterloo? The state of, obviously, higher education with this identitarian obsession.
Yeah, I mean, higher education is supposed to be about open questioning, free speech, open inquiry. Everything goes, and instead, in fact, unfortunately, what's happened is that it's been permeated by ideology. And you've given two examples of that ideology: the notion that there's systemic racism, which is never really proved, but the claim that there is has resulted in something called anti-racism, which appears on the surface to be a warmed-over version of racism, as you just pointed out. It basically suggests that people should be identified by the color of their skin, or in some cases by their gender, not the quality of their character. It's embarrassing, as you point out, and the worst part of all of this, and the example you gave of that course is just one of a bunch of academic programs that I described in my Wall Street Journal article. That is that if you criticize the claims in various ones of these articles, you're basically claimed as a heretic, a racist, a sexist, or whatever. And that's, to me, the real concern in academia is people's fear of speaking out against things that may or may not be nonsense. It should be an open forum for students and faculty to be able to explore anything and be able to criticize anything, because otherwise, how do you make progress?
Even after what happened to Claudine Gay and the University of Pennsylvania president as well, so the Harvard and Penn presidents, Liz McGill, even have what happened to them, like they humiliated themselves in front of the nation and with their congressional testimony, and the response on campus is just to pretend like that didn't happen, or I mean, I guess I think the problem people have who are sort of coming from the same place that you and I are coming from, just the basics of human interaction. We're not to judge people by their color, the content of their character. I don't care what your color is. I don't care about your non-behavioral characteristics. We all need to get along and be collaborative and respectful in this peaceful, pluralistic society if we want to keep it. So, like basic stuff, like grade school stuff from generations ago. And now those are words that cannot be spoken. Like, what does it take to penetrate? It's just people are just baffled by what they can't say and what is being done while they're seemingly spectators.
Well, I mean, the point is, it's like kind of a frog in boiling water. How it's sort of you heat it up, and you never notice what's happening. And what's happened is that a lot of this began with good intent, 30, 40 years ago, to try and ameliorate disparities, in women in science and things like that. And so the intent is good. And then what happens is, what's really kind of happened is that the universities have built up this bureaucracy called diversity, equity, inclusion, that is run by bureaucrats, not academics, that has basically put down this almost totalitarian system that you have to pass loyalty oaths and other things in order to even be hired. And I think the problem with the testimony of the presidents wasn't so much, I mean, yeah, it was kind of ridiculous testimony, but the claim in some sense that they would tolerate free speech in the case of the Palestinians arguing that Israel should be destroyed as a state. The claim that basically open discussion was, they weren't going to condemn open discussion even if they hated the content of the discussion, was ludicrous, because those same universities were having rules about what you could say about gender and how could and claims about whether you're allowed to misgender someone. So the hypocrisy was what was so evident, I think, and that's what's almost more disturbing than their testimony themselves. Because look, I think the point of free speech is the point of free speech is not to allow speech that you agree with, but to allow speech that you disagree with. That's the whole point.
Right.
And if universities were consistent in that regard, then that would be fine. But they're not. And it's basically what you're seeing is an ideological fortress being built around political correctness, around statements about gender and race, and as you say, and what's happening here is the notion that somehow there's such systemic racism that we have to segregate, in the case of Waterloo, blacks so that they can feel safe swimming. I mean, that's patently ridiculous, because in fact of all the places in American culture and Canadian culture that are probably the least racist, the least sexist, traditionally have been universities. They've been the most they've promoted on the whole the ideas of inclusion and equity. As I say, you have to if you look at higher, in fact in Canada, it's even worse than the United States, because they don't have the same constitutional liberties in that, or they're guaranteed. In Canada, those same universities are able to now hire faculty and restrict the people who can apply for the positions to either be a most recent one. This was in engineering and science. The most prestigious chairs, the Canada Research Council chairs, were being restricted to people who were either biracial or two gender, or and in some cases female. You can actually say that white males cannot apply for these positions, and that kind of that hurts everyone. Of course, the problem with that kind of notion is that not only does it suggest that that's needed without ever demonstrating that in fact it's needed, when as far as I can see from in academia it isn't needed. There's so many guarantees to try and have open, inclusive hiring, but it also puts a stigma on those people who are hired ultimately, because later on people are going to say, well, they were hired in a competition which should be based on merit, but 60% of the population was restricted and not allowed to apply. How's that going to be later on in their careers?
Well,
if you aren't looking forward to what's happening.
Yeah, I understand it, but you're right. They're not looking forward. They don't seem to be too concerned about that. They want what they want now, and I guess maybe that's one of the things that we don't understand, where we don't appreciate exactly it is what exactly that which we're dealing. It's not well-intended people. Perhaps it's people. Well, let me finish.
I think it started with it.
Well, maybe. I mean, no, and I think we all know where the road to the road to hell is paved with those good intentions. But I mean, I also think that we don't understand. There are people that this is a power game, and so this is about setting up a system that confers benefits and imposes costs based on certain criteria. And they're executing this system, and they will protect those who are part of the system, just like any other quote unquote good old boys network. So Claudine Gay's plagiarism is duplicative language or inadequate citations. It is not an academic offense. It gets redefined to be something that it isn't, because there's this sort of idea, well, there's a standard here, plagiarism, so we have to recast it as something else. But the point is we will rally around the good old boys and girls in this new system that we've created, and it is for us and by us. And maybe that's what people don't appreciate, that no, everybody's trying to get to the same place. It's one of those things. And no, not everybody is trying to get to the same place, I think.
Well, I think you've hit a lot of it. I wouldn't agree with everything you said, but I think the point is they have become the system. The universities are now literally have spent more money hiring this infrastructure, this bureaucracy called diversity, equity, inclusion, that has produced this kind of totalitarian environment. It's not even the faculty. The faculty are afraid to speak up. In order to be hired in many universities, you have to produce a statement showing how you are actively, in your research, you
Right.
have always actively been anti-racist. Imagine a mathematician or a string theorist working on 11 dimensions, and their life, they've basically been working in their books, but they couldn't get hired. In University of California, Berkeley, on a search for biology professors, they had this loyalty statement that you basically had to write about how you were actively anti-racist. And the diversity, equity, inclusion bureaucracy read those statements before they allowed any of the applications to pass the biology department. 76% of those people were excluded from consideration as professors of biology on the basis of this bureaucracy, this bureaucratic group that filtered them out, not on the basis of their merit in biology, but on the basis of their ideological adherence to the notions of this particular group. And universities across the country have spent hundreds of millions of dollars building up that infrastructure, and that's the problem, because that infrastructure has become the system. And of course, what academia should be based on is merit. And you're seeing examples left, right, and center. And Claudine Gay may be one example. I wasn't on the selection committee, but if you look externally, it doesn't appear as if her hire was based on merit, and that's certainly the appearance of the situation. And that when you move away from that, you attack the very heart of academia, which is really based on the quality of your work and shouldn't be based on anything else. And if you're a biologist, you shouldn't have to show that you agree with the ideological principles of some diversity, equity, inclusion officer who was brought up on critical race theory.
Right. I mean, I think that's right. I think this is what it all boils down to. One group is pushing a system that is predicated on identity, and the other is pushing a system that is predicated on merit, and the two are incongruous. They cannot coexist. And so the choice needs to be presented perhaps in starker terms. And this is why so many men and women of the left in academia are on the outside looking in, because They may be of the left, but they came up in a different environment. They believe different things about what the academy should be, as you were describing, and so they're frozen out too. I mean, this identity group are neo-Jacobins. They will kill their own as necessary, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and that's happening. And you're right. And my politics have traditionally been, over time, one would say, I think, on the left. Yet I write in the Wall Street Journal because that's the place where I can talk about these things. And I think you're seeing classical liberalism, which is what most people of my generation who are sort of leaning on the left are based on. That classical principles of the Enlightenment and liberal thought, open free speech. Those classical liberals are not being associated with what's happening now at the center of universities. And the problem is it's self-perpetuating, because if these organizations restrict the hiring to people who have already bought into the ideological inheritance, then what you see, of course, is who are they going to hire? And that's the real concern. And so you do see that the notion of classical liberalism is not what you cannot be associated with what you might call liberal arts universities around the country right now. And so that's a real scary thing.
No, there's no question about that. That's a dynamic, and they can't be embarrassed either, too. I know you wrote about the Sokol affair. We had more recently that sort of 2.0 version with Boghossian and Lindsay. But it doesn't matter. They cannot be humiliated. They cannot be shamed. They march on. And so my question is, from where does the revolt come? How does this get resized on campus?
Well, that is the I used to say $64,000 question, but $64,000 isn't so much anymore. One hoped, many of us thought that this affair of, say, Claudine Gay would put in stark contrast the hypocrisy that is happening at universities. This university president says, yeah, it's okay to say you're going to kill all Jews, but you better not have a meeting when you're going to say that sex is binary. You better and so we thought that might be a defining moment. It certainly awakened a lot of people, but I think ultimately what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to see this internal. Enough faculty are going to have to be fed up that they start to en masse revolt against this situation. And individual faculty are mostly afraid. They just keep their heads under the radar and try and do their work. And it's hard to know where it's going to go unless there are more episodes like this that expose that bureaucracy, embarrass universities, and potentially, as you're seeing in the case of Harvard and a few other universities, major donors begin to question that. And that's another situation. When major donors begin to say, we have a problem with this, you're going to see universities start to act. And I think that's part of the reason universities have jumped on this social justice bandwagon, because by virtue signaling, by saying words that sound good, diversity, equity, inclusion, they sound like good words, they could try and virtue signal and appear to be in front of the of the movement and try and court students and parents. Ultimately, when they're embarrassing themselves and students stop applying and donors stop giving money, then you'll see, I think, universities begin to respond.
Lawrence Krauss, theoretical physicist, president of the Origins Project Foundation, author of The Edge of Knowledge, Unsolved Mysteries of the Cosmos. Professor Krauss, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks. You take care. Have a good day.
You too, and you joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
50 years of precision tooling. Now that's a lot of job shop work and custom parts. And it's why Bruscher Machining is the go-to CNC turning and machining company in Chicagoland. If you have a custom project, whether it's a single prototype or a short-run production of a few